A long-time Intel official told me, not that long ago, I guess I should have known this, that the big pornography sites are controlled by the Intel agencies. They have access to the data on those sites. And the reason that they do, and I think the dating sites too, and the reason that they do, of course, is blackmail. And once you realize that like the most embarrassing features of your personal life are known by people who want to control you, then you're controlled. And you look at the behavior of some of these people who I know personally, and particularly in the Congress, you're like, why are you doing that? You don't agree with that, and you're out there doing it anyway. We always imagine that it's just donors, so they're getting paid to do that. I think it's more than donors. I've seen politicians turn down donors before.
Tucker Carlson and his guest, Glenn Greenwald, then talked about the Congressman Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson is today Speaker of the House, one of the most important politicians in America. When interviewed by Glenn Greenwald a couple of months ago, he was very anti-FBI and wanted to investigate them to the full extent. Then he got a new job, and he no longer talked about reforming the FBI and limiting its reach. Why?
I don't believe he changed his mind. So the question is, why did he? I don't know. I really don't. But I know that the person that was on my show 2 months earlier no longer exists.
Wow. I can honestly say that's one of the most shocking things I've heard in a long time.
Certainly, two of the great journalists of the world, Tucker Carlson and Glenn Greenwald, are careful to only say it's speculation, but for sure they seem to think that the Speaker of the House, one of the most important elected officials in the United States, may have been swayed from reining in the intelligence agencies and the FBI by possible hint that some of his unsavory habits or dark secrets may otherwise seep out. Taping self-pleasuring is one thing, but there are much more serious and malevolent activities carried out by politicians and other powerful people that the intelligence agencies can record and use against people in power.
Often I was brought afterwards to a villa, also nearby that scenery I described in Belgium. And there was a swimming pool and there were other young teenagers like me, and we were nude, and there was an orgy going on, and we were sexually abused, raped. And there were also bathroom, very chic bathroom. And yeah, this is also pretty heavy detail, if that's okay to share. Because it needs to be told that that in my opinion still is happening and needs to stop. But that in the bathroom stall, is that a good word? That was open and I needed to go to the toilet, and I bumped into a girl who was lying flat, like she was like slide down. She was nude, she was naked, and her lower stomach was fully opened, and her everything was pulled out, and also underneath it, like in her private parts, was also cut, and people lived out their urges.
Tucker Carlson also spoke to one of the world's most connected and powerful men, Elon Musk, about what he knew about this dark side of politics. Maybe that's why so many people are afraid of Trump and his potential to expose secrets.
Kamala's sort of a marionette with, you know, 1,000 puppet masters type of thing. Like not, it's or maybe it's somewhere north of 100 is what it seems like.
Yes. I bet you know 80 of them.
I probably know most of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just by virtue of your job and what you've been doing for the last 30 years, I mean, you just, and I should say, I think you voted for Biden.
I'd like to see a matchup of those, call it the top 100 puppet masters on the FD client list.
Do you think there's some overlap?
Strong overlap. Strong overlap.
When are we going to see that list, do you think?
I don't know. It's mind blowing that they've not tried to prosecute even one, not even the worst offender on the Epstein client list. They've not even tried to prosecute even one. That's insane.
Will that ever come out, do you think?
You know, I think part of why Kamala is getting so much support is that if Trump wins, that Epstein client list is going to become public.
Yes.
And some of those billionaires behind Kamala are terrified of that outcome.
Yeah. Do you think Reid Hoffman's uncomfortable?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Gates.
And Gates.
Yeah.
And I only ask that because you just look at them and you're like, that's a nervous person right there. I don't know. I mean, I assume you know them. Yeah.
Yes. Reid Hoffman was my vice president of business development at PayPal.
Yeah.
20.
While waiting for the release or not by Trump of the Epstein client list, I decided to do some digging of my own. Since I'm based in Europe, I decided to go to Holland, where I had a contact who'd told me on the phone that there was a woman who had incredible stories to tell about the abuse she'd suffered. We're not just talking about a girl who'd had sex with adults, powerful people, but she'd witnessed things that are just beyond the imagination. This, I thought, would add something to what we know and what we're investigating about the pedo world.
Hello.
This is Liz Wallace, a pianist from Amsterdam who was sexually abused as a child and was trafficked to international paedophile networks, sadistically abused by powerful men, and a small cog in what may be the most important story in the world. Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk were talking about Jeffrey Epstein. Here he is, a middle-aged businessman and financier of Jewish origin. It's public knowledge, it's in the mainstream media, that he was an intelligence asset, possibly for the Israelis or the Americans or both. That he flew famous people, politicians, down to his Caribbean island, Epstein Island, and there were orgies and sex with young women. Events were filmed for blackmail purposes. Just how bad was it, though? There's very little detail. Prince Andrew was one of Epstein's friends, and is pictured here with a 17-year-old girl. There was a scandal enough. He lost his royal positions because of it. But a 17-year-old girl is actually above the age of consent. He did nothing illegal. But a guest I had on my show suggested that the Epstein scandal goes deeper than that, only hasn't been covered yet. And there are many other secrets to be uncovered too.
We here in Europe we talk about the word Epstein or Epstein, and it doesn't go into any concrete detail. What did he do? Well, he was friends with Prince Andrew, but you lay out the kind of cover up and the children he was abusing and so on and exploiting in a very concrete way and very well sourced. So can you talk us through a little bit about that story? Because you write here that the media has sanitized the Epstein trafficking network by ostensibly determining that the youngest Epstein victims were 14 years old, even though the multiple accounts state that they were as young as 11 or 12. So we can start there maybe. Were they really that young?
Well, actually, I've got accounts by 3 people that they were under 10 years old. That some of them were under 10 years old.
So Nick is saying American politicians and powerful people were having sex with girls under 10 years old. So the story is more sinister than the likes of just Prince Andrew hanging out with teenagers above the age of consent. But Nick's research does not tell us what things these under 10s were subjected to. Tell us your story and who you are, and let's kick off like that.
Well, I'm Elizabeth Wallace. I am a former full mind controlled slave, as you can call it. I'm a professional pianist and piano teacher, and I was conductor of many choirs at that moment in 1999. And then I started to have the feeling that I fainted behind the grand piano, or when I was playing the piano or organ in a church. And then I felt something is wrong, because I felt like I was floating out of my body. It's a bit like that. And that now I know that it was dissociating, but then consciously be aware of that I was dissociating. And so I reached out for help, but I knew intuitively that I never wanted to go to official therapist or psychiatrist, because I felt he will never relieve me. And that was the whole start of that first memory surfaced of the Dutch life with my front parents and granddad who abused me. But I did not know what that would call up, like more dirt, as I would like to call it, like the dirt jar opened up after a year when I was doing this with her in weekly sessions of 1 hour to 2 hours. And then spontaneously at home came flashbacks, the most horrific ones at home, or when I was in a shopping center, walking, just buying some stuff, and then suddenly I had memories. And that was the start of that, all this came to the surface. First, memories which surfaced were of the Dutch front life, which I call now. I will explain later what I mean with that, but maybe I should say for now how I grew up in the Netherlands. So I always thought that I was just a Dutch girl and very introvert, always playing the piano, drawing, sketching, playing with my dolls, and that I was introvert and had hardly any friends, and I was very shy. And another thing what I then noticed, especially when I started that therapy, was that I realized that I cried every night. I always felt weird with that granddad, and I never understood. Another thing was that when he grimaced, so is that the right word? When he smiled with his teeth, and I always got scared. And he was the one who always wanted to sit me on his lap. Later on, when I met family members, when I still had contact, and they told me we always thought it was weird that he always took you on his lap. But then the first memory surfaced of literally flashbacks or relivings with his granddad, and that he not only sexually abused me but also took me to cafes in my village. He took me to a famous beer factory in Breda in North Brabant, which is a well-known factory, and other industry-like buildings. And there also was taken often to the cellar, where I also was trafficked. But the horrific scenes then broadened. Part of what they called my skills were that I could be strangled very strong in all kinds of ways, and that I still would survive. And that's also snuff movies. It's awful. When I say it, I always almost can cry. It's still, it's awful, because I also saw other children in these snuff movies not survive. And I've seen also hangings in front of my eyes of children. Another example is in a film set where little children and I had to carry, do you know the Teletubbies? Like you have there the sun, there's a start of that Teletubbies, and then you see that smiling sun with a face. That I was in a film studio, and many of the children died around me while wearing a sunflower outfit. So
these are dramatic and far-reaching claims, and surely need corroboration. As it happened, I had another guest on my show, Anneke Lucas, who had similar stories to tell.
Swedish-British journalist, filmmaker, political writer, and author of 5 books, Pelle Neroth Taylor, on today's News Talk, TNT.
Hi there.
So, as I was saying in my monologue, you know, this whole Dutroux thing, which occupied the attention, regarded as the largest and most horrible scandal in Belgian history, where this guy was he locking up girls in his dungeons, and then some of them died. 2 of them died, were buried alive, you know, wrapped in plastic, and 2 girls escaped, and they became cause célèbre and wrote books about it. Dutroux always hinted at that it was part of a much larger, he was a supplier of these girls to a much larger network. And you described that story. So can you tell your story for a little bit of minutes, and then I'll ask you some specific questions about your book, which I read in one fell swoop at this weekend.
Okay, well, that's quite something to read my book in one fell swoop, because it is very heavy. Yes, I was born in Belgium, and I was part of this network. I was sold into the network by my mother, who herself was not part of it. So she got paid. I was immediately taken to orgies. I was traded internationally. The network is not just in Belgium, although the Dutroux case was, the idea, I think, was to uncover the Belgian network specifically. And in the first years I was used mostly, it was very clear that children, and I, as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, was used for blackmail purposes with men that had been indoctrinated into this club, this exclusive club, you could say, that combined business interests with political interests. There were aristocrats there that for whom it seemed this was a style of life, and it used their castles often for orgies and the like. And then the private encounters that I had with adult men were often filmed secretly for blackmail purposes. And then I was also given to some men that were extremely sadistic. In my the earlier years, these were aristocrats. And then at age 9, I was traded to a powerful American who wanted to then own me. And so then I became part of what I call the international network, and was trained for a specific role in the world as well as in the network, and then rebelled. And then the book that you read was the last year in the network after I was rejected out of that, let's say, inner circle of power, and then end up being rescued at age 11 in a very dramatic way, as you've read.
Some of the things are almost too unbelievable to be true, and I have to ask you if it is true, because you said you made a point. One Moroccan boy who kind of had an eye for you, he was shot, and then there's some description of some kind of boy being cooked and served up for a meal, and most people say that can't be true. Is it true?
Well, obviously I wrote it down, and when you bring it out like that, it's difficult because it's so extreme. I wouldn't believe it if I heard it the way you said it just now. So first of all, when we get these memories, it takes a long time for us to believe it, and then there's sort of an investigation into my own memories. I'm getting these memories, these flashbacks and so forth, and so the healing process is that that memory, not only a lot of things start to make sense in your life, but then also I get better.
Let's be clear, paedophile rings do exist. They're well documented. Mainstream media have written about it. It's not conspiracy theory. The questions that remain, though, is how far up do they extend? What circles of society? To what extent recordings of child sex are used to blackmail powerful people, politicians, and the rich? And how vicious and savage and horrible the sexual activities on the children that are carried out are. Is it just touching, penetrative sex, or violence, sadism, and even murder?
This Paul van den Boynants was a prime minister in Belgium, and he is the guy that you name as some kind of the kingpin of this movement. That you call him Polo in the book, and then you give his real name later in the book. I mean, that really goes to the top of Belgian society, doesn't it?
Well, actually, no. He was indeed prime minister twice of Belgium. He was Minister of National Defense when I was being trafficked. But he was not the head of the network. He was just running everything. And I believe that there were people behind the scenes that were more powerful than he was.
And there also was someone more higher leveled in the Dutch society. I think I'd better not call his name, but he was. Many survivors talk about him as well, but he had his dogs with him, and I was then released with the children. That we had a few yards ahead to run for our lives, literally, and then they shot at us, and also the dogs were hunting, gave the order to hunters. And I will never forget, there are memories which are still hard for me to talk about, and when I talk about it, that I, in a way, relive it again, but I do this for every child who is being used. I had to have the idea that I wouldn't survive either, so that they would shot at me as well. But then there was a tiny shed, and I still see that the paint was not really yet, it was not well painted, it was a pretty old and a light color painted, and one of the girls, she was at the most 11 years old, also naked like me, and she was trying to hide behind that shed, and she was leaning against, with her back like this, and totally frozen in fear, and I watched her, and I looked in her eyes, and I always had that with every memory which has surfaced, and with all these happenings where I was involved in, that I looked into her eyes, and she was so scared that they would find her, and I tried to tell her, it's okay, and I prayed to God, and I hoped she would survive. And then suddenly I heard a shot, and then I saw a tiny blood spot on her forehead, and she dropped down. And I still am cold and get goosebumps of it, and trembling of it, because of the contact with her. I will never forget. And it's very precious to say goodbye to someone I knew would die.
One of my days in Amsterdam, I slope off and visit a local aquarium. I'm fascinated by the fish, who apparently have only memory spans of 3 seconds as they swim inside a limited space, blissfully unaware of the great vast forces outside their imagination, limited as it is, to end their lives, refrain from feeding them, tip out their water, move them around, and simply control every aspect of their existence. Those of us who are members of the general public, are our lives equally controlled? Do we have forces around us and above us that we just are not aware of, that control our politicians? We think that we control the politicians, but maybe the politicians have others who control them through blackmail, through fear. But maybe it's more accurate to say that these powerful people control each other through common knowledge of their mutual activities, because they're in hunting teams or participate in sex orgies. In some cases, the blackmail goes one way. An alleged offshoot of the intelligence agency's paedophilia and taping program was the assassination program. The case for this is weaker, and I can't verify it, but it's worth hearing out. Because Liz claimed to have been trained as an assassin after her personality was broken into parts as she was abused. It's a lot of psychological literature about this. You create new personas to shield yourself from the experience of abuse. But that compartmentalized personality structure makes you easy to train to become an assassin.
So tell us about the Black Widow.
Well, I had an inner personality system, and there were many Black Widows, and it was a programming based and put in the Monarch programming, so also the sexual slave programming. And as Black Widow, I was programmed all the time, but my body just did it, and everything, and the whole programming, I was in a trance, and that's very important for me to say. And also to take care of my inner child, who feels a bit tensed about sharing this. But that in hotel rooms, for example, was with certain men who had also to get disposed of or to be blackmailed. And some of them, when they would then kiss me and I had that lipstick, for example, it's just an example of the Black Widow programming. And then we would kiss in the bed and then he would fall asleep. But worse was when it was the lipstick, which had it had a little flower on it, so I could immediately go in trance by seeing that lipstick together with other gestures, and then I would just know, oh, that man needs to be killed, with a kiss on my mouth, because that lipstick was poisoned. And another thing what was put in the lipstick was to cause heart attacks in overall men. I was overall programmed, by the way, to be active with men, and that is an example of it. And another thing about the Black Widow, which still haunts me, some memories, they just don't leave. I feel them, I relive them again. It was that I was wearing black dress. Most of the time in my Black Widow alter personality, I was also wearing black dresses or a very beautiful dress, high-heeled shoes, makeup. I tried to be, of course, as, that the man would be attracted to me. And I was in a private theater. And then afterwards, that was in a private where people can get rid of their coats and so on, and to leave them behind the desk with a certain person. And it was just a tiny place, and it was deserted, and I had to go with that man behind the scenes at that theater. And then I took a knife, a special knife, a lady's dagger, a very tiny mini dagger, and then we were embracing, and then I had to stab him. And I learned techniques where to stab in the right way, that it could reach the heart. And that's still haunting me, and I feel very guilty about it. Because what I also know was what is the man, and that is what haunts me. This man was a good man, but my programmers told me that he was the bad guy. It will haunt me forever. This is I think good that I share this with the world for the first time.
Yeah.
These three crosses over there on the flag, and typical of Amsterdam is the three crosses, and that actually triggers already the X. X can trigger a lot of things in me, what it triggered in me, because I'm now whole. And then together there was here an artwork which was I love Amsterdam. So it was the I in giant letters, and then a heart, Amsterdam. And that is still the slogan of Amsterdam. And it was a programming in me, because I heart Amsterdam. You have then the I, A, M. So I am. Well, I am, you can scramble up these letters. In the programming, they scrambled up a lot of the names, etc. I am, you can also scramble up as Mia or Ami. And all these things. There was a term for it, I forgot how it's called. So it was perfect for me to use in the programming. And I had a personality who was called Mia. And Mia is also missing in action. And that was used in my Black Ops in the military. And it was perfect for also put in television shows and so on to program me and to trigger my programming.
Wow.
Yeah.
Liz claims that she was a broken personality as a child. Broken because she had to find different personas to avoid the pain. This broken personality was later the perfect material for creating a super assassin spy. That's her story. It's hard to verify. There's almost no material on the net. Maybe it's the deepest, darkest secret of the CIA. It obviously requires enormous research and a different documentary to cover the claims in full. But I did find 2 testimonies in a congressional committee for radiation damage in 1995.
I'm Christy Nicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. My parents were divorced around 1966, and Donald Richard Ebner, my natural father, was involved with Dr. Green in the experiments. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976. All these experiments were performed on me in conjunction with mind control techniques and drugs in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Green was using me mostly as a mind control subject from 1966 to 1973. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin.
Good afternoon. Between the years of 1957 and 1984, I became a pawn in a government scheme. His ultimate goal was mind control and to create the perfect spy. I was taught how to coerce them into talking about themselves. And it was Richard Helms, who was deputy director of the CIA, Dr. Gottlieb, kept George White, Morris Allen, who all planned on filming as many high government agency officials and heads of academic institutions and foundations. I was used to entrap many unwitting men, including themselves, all with the use of a hidden camera. All these atrocities did occur to me and to countless other children, and all under the guise of defending our country. And the only means we have to seek out the awful truth and bring it to light is by opening whatever files remain on all the projects.
Liz knows it's hard to get people to believe her. One problem is that even in the somewhat less dramatic claims about underage sex with politicians and public figures, would-be whistleblowers and witnesses tend to disappear or be killed.
When the true scandal, there were 27 people killed. And is that plausible for you? I mean, or do you think it's all conspiracy theory that these people were killed?
Not normal that 27 witnesses are dying suddenly. And the same thing is with the NSU scandal in Germany. 12 witnesses have been somehow died before the court trial, right? This happens all the time.
For that reason, Liz is focused on her own healing.
In the deprogramming, I started then to be confronted with what it was to hit the deeper layers of my of my programming. That I met personality after personality after personality. I hit suicidal layers, which I know. I seem to know that I feel that also from other victims, that these suicide layers, when you hit the suicide layers, that's I cannot describe how that feels, or self-harm layers. I talked about how a personality was created with electroshocks, but on top of that, there were also built around it. It's like an onion. So you have a center of the personality was split up, and had the codes embedded. It was sealed with electroshocks and traumas. And then also were suicide layers built in, and self-harm layers. And I all went through them myself, with, of course, always that I could lean on my dear friend. But the majority I did just when I was alone in the house. And what I learned was, I will get out of it. I somehow always felt it from within. But I took then a phone or iPad and I recorded a flashback like that. And that was for years going on. And also that I, in the deprogramming, got more and more, that there were more and more small child personalities came forward. And then when I finally got out, a bit out of the house, then I was still confronted with behavior in myself. So the deprogramming is not only tough for myself, but also for the people who know me and knew me. And this is why I lost many friends, because I was so fearful. Because I knew one thing, that if I keep going on, then there will come a moment that I will reach the core and will be free and whole again.
The Fox News Decision Desk can now officially project that Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
The former president's comeback will be complete with a win in Wisconsin, a state that he narrowly lost 4 years ago. He is now the second president.
Just look at Epstein for a second. When you're looking at his circle of influence, he is somebody who's kind of recruiting, just getting people on tape doing horrible things or raising money so they're in the pocket, right? Is that kind of his role?
I think that's part of it, but at the same time, he's doing a lot of that. He's also involved in financial crimes pretty much throughout his career. I mean, that's the common thread from Epstein from the 70s until his second arrest. But they would know that if he was working as an operation, that would kind of be overlooked. I think it was known. I mean, even in January 2020, you have John McCain's wife, Cindy McCain, saying, we all knew what Epstein was doing.
Right.
And this is the wife of a senator with no direct connection to the Epstein scandal. So that means top people in our Congress and Senate knew what Epstein was up to, and nothing was done.
And so is there a big body count?
Around Epstein?
Yeah.
I think there is to an extent. Mark Middleton, who I just mentioned, was found hung by the neck by an extension cord in May with a shotgun wound to the chest. and it was ruled suicide in Little Rock, Arkansas. And a local court ruled pretty shortly thereafter that no video or, photos of the scene could be publicly released. And this was only after, Mark Middleton had been involved in Chinagate and numerous other scandals, but that only happened just a few months after the visitor logs of him meeting with Epstein was released last December, published by the UK's Daily Mail.
So that's one. But
that's one recently. You also have Jean-Luc Brunel, who was a major facilitator of his sex trafficking activities, particularly when it came to the modeling industry. Turned up dead in his prison cell. You have Epstein himself, and then you have the son of Esther Salas, who was the judge overseeing the Epstein Deutsche Bank case, murdered at her home.
Let's not just gloss over Epstein and his death. Do you believe he hung himself?
I think the official story is just, it's crazy, personally, because, he was a tall guy. He's supposed to have hung himself from something that's shorter than his standing height with like paper thin sheets. He would have had to curl up in the fetal position to hang himself. And
You're not going to do that.
It's very, it's logistically impossible. We're supposed to believe all the cameras malfunctioned that night. The prison guards were asleep. It's a lot of coincidences.
So who would we have to believe? I mean, that would have to involve lots of government.
Sure. But he belonged to intelligence. And if you look at, someone like Robert Maxwell, he died off of his yacht. He had a lot of ties to intelligence. Things were, the walls were closing in on him, and his own daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, thinks he was murdered by rogue Mossad agents and Sicilian contract hitmen. And that's coming straight from his daughter that worked closely with him. So.
I know a couple of people who I know are compromised in the U.S. government, and I sort of feel sad for them, because how'd you like to be in that position? All it would take is one brave man to give a press conference.
Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah.
Would you?
I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah.